The White House has opened its briefing room to a diverse group of content creators, marking a significant step towards engaging a wider audience. New media outlets, influencers and content creators encouraged to apply for press credentials. This from the White House. Now, the initiative aims to leverage social media and also video platforms, providing a unique opportunity for creators to share their perspectives on important issues. Officials hoping the move will enhance transparency, also encourage new voices in political discourse. This is something that Trump learned, perhaps through his son Barron, through the campaign, that it isn't just about sitting down with NBC, ABC, CNN or CBS. It's also about sitting down with the new guard. I have gone historically on a lot of press junkets with, say, airlines that are announcing new routes or new aircraft. And the thing that I've started to notice in my career is it isn't just about the old media or the workplaces that you and I have worked at in the past. There's also influencers, because they realise that young people aren't getting their news from the old-fashioned 6 p.m. news as much these days. They're getting it from social media influencers who don't have the same groupthink that can quite often occur within the press corps.
It certainly comes down to eyeballs, right? All of those views, whether it is done in a state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar studio and extremely polished, or really just in someone's home office if they have a microphone. As long as you have those views, you're really kind of able to rule things. So very interesting to hear Karoline Leavitt. She is the youngest press secretary in U.S. history at 27 years old. She made that announcement saying that 2 seats that are along the wall of the briefing room, which is usually reserved for White House staff members, will be open to some of these new media. And they clearly recognize the shift in what is happening with America. You know, when you talk about being a CEO, and of course, Aaron, I think you can attest to this professionally, looking to the future, you know, looking to see what's changing, having that vision is so key so that you can stay ahead of things and also ahead of the competition. And I think Donald Trump continuously brings that CEO lens, you know, that we talked about earlier in the show to everything. And so while he was doing these rallies, you know, they were open to some of these other channels, even if they were just streaming the rallies online. They understood that they had lots of views. And as you mentioned, his son Barron, of course, was instrumental in having him go on Joe Rogan. And so we're going to see a very new, different, unique White House press briefing on a daily basis. Yeah, and I mean, you look at the coverage of the inauguration and the US election, more viewers watched on YouTube than on the old-fashioned broadcast for the very first time. It is moving quickly. Let's have a listen now to the new White House press secretary explaining all this.
This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment. So it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House.
And good on them for doing so. I think back to the very early days of Ticker back in 2019. It was 2020, obviously, where COVID hit. And here in Melbourne, the state of Victoria, which has a very progressive left-wing government, they would not give us access. They would not, even though I'd been a journalist for a very long time, they wanted to limit the number of people and the people who could attend their briefings to journalists from news organisations that they had dealt with for a very long time. And I wondered whether that was the right way to go, or if I was some left-wing news organisation, whether they would have very much accepted us. But they'd almost rather new media didn't exist. That seemed to be the tone. Now, it does exist. It's where people are getting their content from. And while so many politicians in the Westminster system have been building up their own followings, I think the Andrews government here in Victoria spent millions and millions buying likes on the Facebook page of the Premier, for example. The fact is that to reach audiences that are impartial, you have to go beyond your own following.
Absolutely. And, again, this is not something new. It's just that President Trump recognized it and said, okay, we are embracing this. Let's move forward. Let's work together. Very much a business attitude. Because if you looked at the Biden-Harris administration, even though Karine Jean-Pierre would be doing the White House briefings, they were streaming online. And so many times we saw these podcasters like Joe Rogan and so many others and Call Her Daddy. You can take snippets from this and then play it out and discuss it. So even though they weren't in the room for the White House press briefing, these different types of people, communicators, influencers, whatever you want to call them, hosts, they were still discussing it. So now they just have a seat at the table. So, good for them for recognizing the future.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and also might help with resources for those organisations as well, as resources for major media organisations continue to drop. CNN announcing job cuts, we've seen that, and a lot of them moving towards digital and away from traditional broadcast. So it's levelling the playing field for so many different broadcasters, streamers, content creators, news organisations like Ticker as well, to say that no one should hand out a licence to be a news organisation. We often talk in this country about how Rupert Murdoch News Corp quote, own 75% of the newspapers. They don't. It's just their newspapers are bought by 75% of the audience, and there is nothing stopping anyone from starting a newspaper. But I would argue in this day and age, imagine being stupid enough to do so. Veronica, appreciate your time as always.
Thanks, Aaron.